Anita Crowthorne, the soon-to-be victim, is wealthy, imperious, and enjoys needling the others. She doesn't just disagree with opinions, she dismantles them with a smirk. Pat, the most easygoing of the group, tries to keep the peace but occasionally rolls her eyes when Anita isn't looking. Carol, usually quiet, tenses whenever Anita speaks, as if bracing for a blow. The others, perhaps a retired teacher, a widow, a sharp-witted gardener, each have their own reactions, from amusement to barely concealed irritation. The discussion starts innocently enough. Someone praises the book's clever plot, another complains about the detective's unrealistic intuition. But then Anita, swirling her wine, because of course she drinks wine while the others have tea, makes a remark that cuts a little too deep. "I don't know why you're all so shocked by the murder," she says. "People like that, meddlesome, self-righteous, they practically invite violence." A beat of silence follows. Was that a joke? A threat? No one laughs. Tess studies Anita, wondering if she's always been this cruel or if something has sharpened her tongue lately. Carol's hands shake when she reaches for her tea after Anita makes a pointed comment about people with skeletons in their closets. Pat changes the subject a little too quickly when the topic of inheritance comes up, a sore point given Anita's recent dispute with a neighbor over property lines. Tess notices a folded piece of paper tucked into Anita's book. Later, she'll wonder if it was a blackmail list, a will, or something worse. As the women gather their coats to leave, Anita lingers, smirking. "Next time," she says, "we should read a book about getting away with murder. I suspect some of us would find it useful." No one answers. The words hang in the air, heavy with meaning. The moment when Anita Crowthorne's body is discovered is where Murder at the Book Club shifts from a light-hearted gathering of literary-minded friends to a genuine whodunit. Yet it does so without losing the warmth and wit that defines a cozy mystery. The scene is carefully crafted to balance shock with plausibility, ensuring the reader feels both the weight of death and the intrigue of an unfolding puzzle. A mundane morning turned macabre. The discovery begins with something utterly ordinary, perhaps Tess or one of the other book club members stopping by Anita's grand, slightly ostentatious home to return a borrowed book or discuss the next month's reading selection. There's no sense of impending doom at first, just the usual minor annoyance of dealing with Anita's demanding nature. Maybe the visitor notices the front door is slightly ajar, which is odd, but not alarming. Anita might have forgotten to close it properly. But then, the atmosphere shifts. The house is too quiet. The usual sharp click of Anita's heels on the hardwood floor is absent. A teacup sits half-finished on the table, cold. A book lies open, face down, as if abandoned mid-sentence. And then, there she is. Anita, sprawled in her favorite armchair, her face unnaturally pale, her lips slightly parted, as if she had been interrupted mid-sneer. At first glance, it could be natural causes, a heart attack perhaps. Anita wasn't young after all, but then the details start piling up. The smell of bitter almonds lingering in the air, a classic hint of cyanide poisoning for those familiar with detective fiction, which of course these women are. A half-empty glass of sherry on the side table, the liquid slightly cloudy. A crumpled note clutched in Anita's hand, the words too smudged to read. But was it a clue or a red herring? The visitor's first reaction isn't horror, but a strange, detached curiosity. This feels like one of our mystery novels, someone might think, before the reality sets in. No, this is real. And one of us might have done it. What makes this scene so compelling is how each character's response subtly hints at their possible guilt or innocence. Tess, ever the observer, doesn't scream or panic. Instead, she notes everything: the position of the body, the state of the room, as if already piecing together the crime. Pat, usually so cheerful, might freeze in genuine shock. Or is there something more calculated in her hesitation? Carol, who always seemed afraid of Anita, might look oddly relieved for a split second before the expected horror takes over. Even the way they call the police is telling. Do they sound genuinely distraught, or is there an undercurrent of performance in their voices? When the authorities show up, they dismiss the death as likely natural. After all, Anita was elderly, and these things happen. But the book club members know better. They've read enough mysteries to recognize murder when they see it. And so, even as the police wrap up their cursory examination, the women exchange glances. They don't need to say it aloud. If no one else will find the truth, we will. The discovery of Anita's body has shattered the quiet rhythm of the book club, but it's in the aftermath, the first stirrings of investigation, where the story truly comes alive. This is the moment when the women, who have spent years dissecting fictional crimes, realize they must now apply those skills to a real-life murder. What follows is a deliciously layered scene where intellect clashes with emotion, and the line between amateur sleuthing and dangerous meddling begins to blur. Gathered once again in Tess's cozy sitting room, surrounded by the familiar comfort of well-worn paperbacks and the faint scent of Earl Grey, the book club reconvenes. But this time, there are no light-hearted debates about plot twists or prose. The air hums with nervous energy. Someone has brought a plate of shortbread, but it sits untouched. The usual chatter is replaced by a heavy silence, broken only when Tess, in her quiet but firm librarian's voice, says what they're all thinking. Anita didn't just die. She was murdered. And if we don't figure out who did it, the police never will. What unfolds is a fascinating transformation. These women, who've spent decades as passive consumers of mystery novels, now find themselves slipping into the roles they've only ever read about. Tess becomes the de facto detective, her analytical mind parsing through inconsistencies in Anita's final days. Pat, with her knack for gossip and village connections, takes on the role of the informant, piecing together rumors and grudges. Carol, usually so timid, surprises them all by recalling tiny, damning details, the way Anita's hand trembled when she drank her tea last week, the odd phone call she overheard. They spread out Anita's last borrowed library book on the table, searching for underlined passages or hidden notes. They dissect her final words at the book club meeting, reading malice into every sarcastic comment. It's equal parts exhilarating and terrifying. For the first time, the stakes are real. As they begin their investigation, long-buried village tensions rise to the surface. They learn that Anita wasn't just unpleasant, she was dangerous. The folded paper Tess noticed in Anita's book turns out to be a list of names with cryptic notes next to them. Carol, 1987. Pat, the letters. Mrs. Hawthorne, the will. A visit to Anita's house, under the flimsy pretense of fetching a casserole dish she borrowed, reveals a locked drawer in her desk, picked open with a hairpin. Inside, they find envelopes, some containing cash, others holding old photographs with faces torn in half. A conversation with the local pharmacist reveals Anita had been asking unusual questions about prescription medications in the weeks before her death. Each clue feels like turning a page in one of their beloved mysteries, except now, the villain isn't a fictional caricature. It's someone they've known for years, someone who might be watching them right now. The scene reaches its quiet climax when the women confront an unsettling truth. Any one of them could have done it. Each had motive, each had opportunity, The same knowledge of poisons they'd gleaned from mystery novels could have been turned to deadly purpose. For the first time, suspicion flickers between them, not openly acknowledged, but they're all the same, like a draft from an unseen crack in the wall. As the meeting breaks up, Tess lingers, staring at the list of names in Anita's handwriting. One name in particular catches her eye, someone unexpected. The camera, if this were a film, would zoom in on that name as the chapter ends, leaving the reader desperate to turn the page. The unraveling of Anita's secrets is where Murder at the Book Club shifts from a simple whodunit into something richer, a delicate excavation of the lies and half-truths that bind small communities together. This scene is less about dramatic confrontations and more about quiet, devastating realizations, the kind that settle into the room like dust disturbed after decades. It begins with something small, an offhand comment from the postmaster about how Anita had been receiving those peculiar letters again, or perhaps Tess noticing a familiar surname scribbled in the margin of Anita's address book, the sort of detail that would mean nothing to an outsider but sends a jolt of recognition through someone who's lived in the village for years. The book club's investigation takes on the quality of an archaeological dig. They aren't just looking for clues about Anita's murder. They're peeling back the carefully maintained facade of their community. Old grudges resurface not with shouting, but with averted eyes and suddenly clipped conversations at the bakery. The women find themselves tracing patterns, the way certain names keep appearing in Anita's notes, in old newspaper clippings about a decades-ago scandal involving misappropriated church funds. The realization that several accidents from years past, a fall down the stairs, a near-fatal allergic reaction, happened to people who'd crossed Anita. The quiet understanding that some of the village's most upstanding citizens have been paying Anita small, regular sums for years, always in cash. What makes this scene so compelling is how the revelations land. These aren't shocking twists delivered with gasps and dramatic music, but slow dawning horrors that settle into the pit of the stomach. Carol's hands shake when they discover a photo of her late husband in Anita's files, dated 2 years after his supposed death in a car crash. Pat goes very still when they piece together that the harmless little loans she's been getting from Anita were actually blackmail payments over an affair the whole village had pretended not to know about. Tess finds herself staring at an old library checkout card tucked in Anita's papers, her own signature from 20 years ago, back when a certain book about untraceable poisons went mysteriously missing. The most damning evidence isn't a smoking gun, but ordinary objects made sinister by context. A birthday card with a veiled threat tucked inside the verse, a recipe book with certain ingredients underlined, a stack of bank statements showing regular deposits on the first of every month like clockwork. As the pieces come together, an uncomfortable truth takes shape. Anita didn't just happen to uncover these secrets, she cultivated them. Like a gardener tending poisonous plants, she'd been nurturing the village's shames for years, waiting for the right moment to harvest. Which leads to the inevitable, chilling question. Did she finally push someone too far? Or did one of her victims decide to prune the gardener? The scene closes not with a bombshell, but with the book club members sitting in heavy silence, each wrestling with the same realization that the killer, when found, won't be some shadowy stranger, but a neighbor, a friend, perhaps even one of them. The discovery of a second body lands like a thunderclap in Murder at the Book Club, shattering any illusion that Anita's death was an isolated incident. This scene transforms the story from a straightforward whodunit into something darker, a tightening noose of suspicion where the killer isn't just among them, but actively hunting. What makes this moment so chilling isn't just the violence, but how it exposes the fragility of the women's amateur investigation, turning their intellectual game into a matter of life and death. In the days following Anita's murder, the book club had begun to settle into their new roles as amateur sleuths. There was almost a thrill to it, comparing notes over tea, following leads with the careful precision of lifelong mystery readers. They had started to believe they were in control, that the killer was a static puzzle to be solved rather than a living, breathing threat. Then comes the morning when Pat doesn't show up for their usual coffee at the village bakery. At first, it's annoyance, then concern. Pat never misses their meetups. When Tess rings her doorbell and gets no answer, she tells herself it's just Pat forgetting to charge her hearing aids again. But the unlocked door swings open too easily. The house smells wrong, not the usual lavender and baking, but something metallic beneath the air freshener. Pat's body is found not neatly arranged like Anita's, but sprawled halfway to the telephone, her floral housecoat soaked in blood. A carving knife from her own kitchen lies nearby. This isn't the clean poison of the first murder. This is messy, desperate, personal. The scene screams one terrible truth. Pat knew something, and the killer knew she knew. The horror of this moment comes not just from the violence, but from its intimacy. This is no longer about a disliked woman meeting a convenient end. It's about a friend, a confidant, slaughtered in her own home. The book club's earlier excitement curdles into real fear. Their game has become deadly serious. Pat's notebook half hidden under the sofa, its last entry reading, "Anita's ledger, the initials aren't what we thought," before the sentence cuts off mid-word. A single muddy boot print on the otherwise spotless kitchen floor, too large to be Pat's. The telephone receiver left off the hook, the dial tone humming ominously. Most damning of all is the realization that Pat had been the one to suggest re-examining Anita's financial records just the day before. She'd laughed about how killers in books always slipped up on money trails. Now she's dead, and her research notes are missing. As the remaining book club members gather in hushed panic, the dynamic between them shifts irrevocably. Where before there was camaraderie, now there are sidelong glances and carefully chosen words. Carol, normally so timid, becomes nearly catatonic with fear. Tess finds herself studying the other's hands. Had one of them nicked themselves while wielding that knife? Even the cozy setting of their usual meeting space feels sinister now, the cheerful floral curtains and well-loved armchairs at odds with the terror thrumming beneath the surface. The most devastating moment comes when someone, perhaps the normally unflappable retired headmistress, whispers, "It has to be one of us." No one else knew Pat was looking into the ledger. The silence that follows is heavier than any accusation. It shatters the cozy illusion. The gloves are off, and the stakes are visceral. The violence contrasts starkly with Anita's clean poisoning, showing the killer is capable of both calculation and passion. It turns suspicion inward. The first murder could have been an outsider, but this one? This was personal. By the scene's end, the remaining book club members realize with dawning horror that they're not just investigators anymore. They're potential victims. And the killer isn't just hiding in the shadows. They're sitting in the circle, sipping tea, and waiting to see who figures it out next. The air in Tess's cottage is thick with tension, the usual comforting scent of bergamot and old books now laced with something sharper: fear. The book club has dwindled to its core members, their numbers reduced by death and suspicion. They know too much now. And worse, the killer knows they know. What began as an intellectual exercise has become a deadly game of cat and mouse, and in this scene, the women decide to stop running. The idea comes not in a moment of inspiration, but exhaustion. They've followed every lead, examined every clue, and still the killer remains just out of reach. Then Tess, her fingers tracing the spine of a well-worn Agatha Christie novel, realizes they've been approaching this all wrong. "We've been trying to find the killer," she murmurs, "when what we need is to make the killer find us." The trap is simple in theory. They'll plant false evidence, a fabricated page from Anita's ledger perhaps, or a lost letter naming the murderer, and wait to see who takes the bait. But the execution is fraught with danger. Every step must be perfectly choreographed. The right rumor whispered to the right person, the damning document accidentally left in view during their next meeting, the careful observation of who lingers a little too long near a handbag or who suddenly develops an interest in the fireplace ashes. What makes this scene so deliciously tense is its theatricality. The women who've spent years analyzing the mechanics of mystery novels now find themselves acting in one. Carol, usually so nervous, becomes unexpectedly convincing when she slips up and mentions the ledger page to the vicar's wife. Pat's replacement, a sharp-eyed newcomer named Margaret, makes a show of examining the fake evidence before tucking it into her knitting bag for safekeeping. Every glance, every pause, every seemingly offhand comment is carefully calculated to lure the killer into revealing themselves. Yet beneath the performance, real fear thrums. The women know this could go horribly wrong. The killer has already struck twice. What's to stop them from eliminating the entire book club? The cozy trappings of their gathering, the steaming teapot, the plate of digestives, the familiar stack of library books, become a stark contrast to the deadly stakes at play. As twilight falls and the meeting draws to a close, the trap is sprung. Perhaps it's the sound of a drawer being quietly opened in the next room, or the sight of someone's gloves lingering too long near the compromising document. The reveal is never dramatic. No grand monologue, no mustache-twirling confession, but in its quiet inevitability, all the more chilling. The killer's face, when confronted, shows not rage, but something almost worse: resignation. They've been outplayed at their own game by the very women they underestimated. The motive, when it finally comes to light, is both petty and heartbreaking. A decades-old slight, a secret too shameful to bear exposure, a love turned to bitterness. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell for more. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. See you in the next one. Bye for now.